Well, hello, everyone, dear Penn Live and Patriot News readers and viewers and listeners. This is Joyce Davis, Penn Live's outreach and opinion editor, and we are here with another actually public editorial board meeting. We are recording this meeting with candidate for the Congress, Janelle Stelson, and we are issuing invitations to her opponent, U.S. Representative Scott Perry, as well as to the candidates in the major races that Pennsylvania voters will decide. But to get us started, before we go, I want to welcome our editorial board that's here, Dr. Nirmal Joshi, a highly respected physician in our area, Vinnie Portzline, an advocate for people with disabilities and for all people, I will say as well, Reverend Sandy Strauss, who is also well known formerly with the Pennsylvania Council of Churches, still an activist, recently honored by Penn Live with the Peace and Justice Award. We have Jeffrey Lord, who many know as a Republican pundit, right? And Gloria Merrick, who's with the Latino community here, executive director of the Latino Hispanic American Community Center, and David Dix. Not forgive me, not David.
Oh my.
I know, oh my, David Dix, who's a member of our editorial board and and an entrepreneur, a businessman in Pennsylvania. So we welcome everybody here. We also have reporter Charles Thompson, who is with us as well, who will be keeping tabs on everything that's said in case any news is made. So again, welcome everyone. And as we have told Janelle Stelson, this is really going to be about her, allow her an opportunity to speak to our readers and to let us know what's the most important thing that she believes are facing voters in Pennsylvania in her district, District 10. So, candidate Janelle Stelson, the floor is yours. Let us know a little bit about you and what your priorities are.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, especially the terrific writer, Charlie Thompson. You're lucky to have him. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more about myself. As many of you know, I've been a journalist for the past 38 years and TV anchor news reporter, and have been listening to folks here in the 10th District for that long. That's one thing I hope will never change. I'm enjoying hearing what everybody has to say, their views on the upcoming election and what they think about, all of the candidates up and down the ticket. So it's been a very, very interesting year.
Very good. Well, that's a little bit about you. Now, tell us, what do you see as the top issues? I mean, for you, why are you running? What do you see as those top issues for voters?
Well, Joyce, again, the job description is representative. So it's not so much what I think, it's what I'm hearing from other people as I'm listening all across the 10th District. And I'd say probably the top three issues I hear about are affordability, abortion, and that Washington is deeply broken, and Scott Perry is part of that. They don't want the paralyzing partisan politics that we've seen. They just want somebody who's going to take care of business. They want to make life, again, more affordable, which is a really big deal. When people have to be making the tough decisions about whether to put food on the table or gas in their tanks. And as you know, we have a lot of rural areas, so that gas is pretty important if you want to get where you're going. Then you talk about the super high rates right now for mortgages and rents, and also, life-saving prescription drugs. A lot of people are having to make the tough decision about which one they want to not do in a particular month. And I'm sorry that anybody ever has to make that choice. My opponent voted against the government's ability to negotiate prescription drug prices with pharmaceutical companies, which is going to save us about $110 billion in fairly short order. And I think that's a big deal to people around here. The cap on insulin, I hear a lot about that as well, something else that he voted against. He has taken so many votes recently that are in no way, shape, or form representing Republicans, which is his party. He's just so extreme now. I think they're looking for new leadership as well. And I'm happy to go in depth on any of these, Joyce. I don't want to talk and talk. I don't know if you want a question format or.
No, very good. You've done a good job of laying out there. Right at this point, I want to urge our editorial board, if you do have questions, because I have a lot of them. If you do
Okay,
have,
good.
please do unmute and ask them, or raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. But for now, I'm happy to start off with delving a little bit deeper into this. Now, I'll have to tell you that I hear the talk about things not being affordable, et cetera, and prices high. But we do see that, at least according to the authoritative reports, prices have started coming down. Inflation is lowering, and I do wonder just how much power even a U.S. representative has to really bring down prices. Tell us that. What really could you do?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do. And when you talk about bringing down prices, not only that, but we can bring up wages. I mean, let's start with Pennsylvania's minimum wage. 7.25. I'd like to see Scott Perry or any of his colleagues try to live on that for a month. 7.25 doesn't even buy you a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk if you work for 1 hour. It is nearly double that in all our surrounding states. West Virginia has a higher minimum wage than we do and a much lower cost of living. So there is that. But in terms of affordability, these things like, Scott Perry voted repeatedly against or voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Let's talk about insurance. That's a big chunk out of everybody's paychecks if they're lucky enough to have one. And, it gave millions of Americans, tens of millions, including a lot here in Pennsylvania and here in the 10th district, insurance for the first time, and affordable insurance. That's a big deal as well. There is an awful lot we can talk about in terms of affordability that Congress does have the ability to work on. And in the past 12 years, we've pretty much seen bupkis from our representative. And when I say representative, I usually use air quotes.
I got it. Well, listen, let me ask you this. Clearly, what you've outlined is important and it's something that a representative can do, but can't really achieve unless there are others who are thinking the same and acting the
Yeah.
same, right? So I guess the question that I would have for you is, how are you going to bridge this divide, right? How are you going to reach across the aisle to get Republicans or to get even enough Democrats to your point of view? What's your strategy for dealing and bringing people to your point of view?
Well, to not create chaos in Congress and to actually reach across the aisle as an American and try to achieve our goals. When you hear people's concerns and their issues around here, they're not looking for somebody to go to Washington and play partisan politics, which is what Scott Perry's been doing. He's been the chief obstructionist in this 118th Congress that's basically accomplished nothing. They've accomplished fewer pieces of legislation than at any time in the past century. And I think people are fed up. They just want to make sure, again, they can take care of their children, maybe afford school if that's what their children want to do post high school. And, here we have a congressman who, so for the past 12 years, he has taken votes against every other Republican in Pennsylvania, against every other Democrat in the congressional delegation. For instance, he voted against housing homeless veterans. He was against further health benefits for military men and women who breathed in the toxic burn pits in war zones. He voted again. He was the only Republican, the only Democrat who voted not to give medals to the police officers, Capitol Police, and the others who defended our bastion of democracy on January 6th, and who also protected his life and the lives of his colleagues, so that a few hours later, he could go safely back into the House chamber and vote to overturn all our votes. Everybody here, vote to overturn our votes. For me, that's disqualifying enough. But he's the only one who voted against, helping the most vulnerable among us, young people who've been sex trafficked. He voted against services for them. He voted against protecting firefighters from the toxic chemicals in some of their gear. So again, here's a guy who in no way, shape, or form even represents Republicans anymore. He's so extreme and causing so many problems. And I would submit that most of us, at least this is what I'm hearing from folks, operate somewhere in the center. We're not far left, far right, anything else. We just want to elect a representative who carries our voices to the halls of Congress and tries to accomplish what we need. And that's very much the kind of person I see myself being.
Well, thank you. That was a pretty thorough explanation there. Reverend Strauss, you have your hand up.
Yes. Pennsylvania, of course, has an aging population, has, I think, a higher percentage than most states of older folks. And I actually happened to recently start on Social Security myself. So my question is, on Social Security, the Republicans in general have for years been saying, this is a problem. We can't afford to do this. Let's cut back. Let's raise the age. How do you feel about raising the cap? Because the cap on Social Security, there are people who, I forget what the actual cap is right now, but there are people who are cut off at whatever that level is, 200,000, something like that, and could pay a lot more. And that would certainly preserve the Social Security system forever, I think.
It would,
How do you
Reverend.
feel about that?
There's actually a lot we can do, and cutting benefits is not an option. America made this problem. People have worked their entire lives. You know, you're right. We do have a lot of older folks here who either are ready to retire or have retired. Scott Perry wrote on his own website that he wanted to cut your Social Security benefits, raise the taxes on them, and raise the eligibility to at least 69 years old. That is not the answer. These are benefits everybody has earned. And again, America made this promise to you that the benefits would be there so you could retire with dignity. You know, if you want to hop on a train and, I don't know, go to Oregon and see your grandchildren or something like that, you should be able to do that because of the promises that were made and the money you expected and the benefits you earned. So that's a terrible idea. There's a lot we can do to shore up Social Security and make sure it's there for everybody it's been promised to.
Very good. I want to, unless anyone else has a question, I want to actually dive into the most recent thing that's out there that has been approved. And it's the issue of whether I have lived overseas, right? Lived overseas 3 times and voted from overseas. And so I'm a bit concerned about the attacks that we see being made for voters, Americans, including service people, I guess. I mean, it's kind of hard to understand why anybody would make it harder for an American citizen or their families to vote if they are like in France or somewhere. So talk about that. What is your position on all of this? And then tell us about your kitty cat there. Okay.
Sorry, I was on the board of the Humane League for many years and seemed to have picked up some friends along the way.
All right. So we'll talk about your humane work later, but go ahead. What about
this is a very important issue you bring up. In fact, Scott Perry himself has twice voted when he was stationed overseas. So the fact that he wants to contract the rights of people to vote, I would like to see voting expanded. You know, on the news for years, it was so sad when we reported the percentages, particularly in the primaries, of people who actually vote. You know, we need to make this such an important thing so that everybody understands that their voice matters. I would like to see the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed nearly immediately if I'm lucky enough to get in Congress. And again, you said there have to be like-minded people there, but I hope that happens. And I hope we can make that happen. You know, I don't know why anybody, Republican or Democrat, Scott Perry certainly, would be, trying to get fewer people to vote rather than more. This is a really, really important part of our democracy.
Very good. Are there any other questions from our editorial board? Yes, go ahead, Dr. Joshi.
Thank you for making time. So a couple of questions. So it seems like that the way, the current election stands overall is that people, the vast majority of people seem to have made up their minds for reason X, Y, or Z on this side or this side. And they are so rigidly entrenched in that point of view that the candidate seemingly doesn't even seem to matter. It's here are the things I'm for, and across the board, here's what I stand for, and this side of the the right is willing to give me this, the left is willing to give me this, and therefore I'm set in my ways. And it's almost like you can be screaming on the rooftops, and everyone is screaming on the rooftops, that no one's listening, right? So I suspect what's going to happen across the board, including your race, is going to be the sliver of people in the middle who will either tip it this direction or will tip it that direction, right? There are several people who are extraordinarily concerned about the shrill level of rhetoric from multiple politicians about how lamenting how things are and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So here's the question. That's kind of the backdrop. The question is, what are you as a and I'm sure you folks think about that's what you're doing right now. What are you folks doing at your campaign level where the stakes are really high? The fact of the matter is, statistical odds are someone like yourself who is fighting an establishment will find it extraordinarily difficult. It's obviously all surmountable. That's why you're running, but it'll be a tough process, and you know that. My question to you is, what are you doing to appeal to that central zone to be able to say, hey, come my way? Because those on here and here are either on your camp or they're in the opposition camp, and they don't care, right? They are fixed in their...
Right.
Good question. Let's let Janelle answer that one. How are you appealing to the moderates?
Well, it's kind of easy because that's who I am. But Doctor, I think that you're right on the national level. Here in PA10, though, we're a little bit of a different animal. We've got an interesting mix of people, and I call it a thinking district because even though it's a +4, +5 Republican district, we voted for Josh Shapiro by 12 points over a state lawmaker, Doug Mastriano, who was also an extremist, but is nothing but Scott Perry light. So what we're just trying to do is get the message out and show people exactly what they're getting in true democratic form, meaning democracy, not party. In true democratic form, when you walk into the booth, you'll know exactly who you're voting for. You'll know what Scott Perry's voting record is, part of which I've outlined to you. And you'll know what I stand for, which has been a steeper climb because for 38 years, I've been the nonpartisan voice in everybody's living rooms, the trusted nonpartisan voice who hasn't stood for anything politically in terms of what the public would know. Because, I was absolutely, it's part of the job. You're required to be nonpartisan. But again, so we've just been working to make sure the message gets out and that folks know what they're getting, either whether they vote early or when they walk into the booth November 5th. So it's been really interesting. And I think part of that is for Republicans to understand, whether you're voting for President Trump or whoever you're voting for, they need to know exactly that Scott Perry is not really representing them anymore. He is now so extreme that he's an outlier who is an obstructionist and keeping the people's business from being done.
And I have to say that I might push back a little. I hear what Dr. Joshi is saying, but where I'm sitting, I have been kind of overwhelmed by the number of op-eds and letters I'm getting from Republicans who are like going another way this election and making it very clear. So one of the things that somebody's trying to reach me as usual, some of the things that I'm concerned about is, how are you responding? Do you have people who have crossed over, formerly all Republican? Do you have that contingent as well in your race?
I say my favorite words in the English language right now are, I'm a Republican and I'm voting for you. And sometimes it's a handshake that gets pulled in conspiratorially in a whisper because they don't want anybody else to know. Whatever you want to do with your politics, whether you want to yell about it or whisper it, I'm here for PA10. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Let's take immigration, for instance. One of the biggest issues facing Americans right now. I'm a pragmatist. I'll reach across the aisle and work with anybody to get this solved. We have to secure our border. The same border that Congressman Perry flew on the taxpayers' dime to a couple of months ago and pointed all the blame at Democrats. Well, for me, this is an American problem, not Democratic, not Republican, and both parties have been botching it for quite a while now. And again, we have to properly fund, which he has opposed repeatedly. We have to properly get the right number of border security agents. We need to get more judges, more attorneys involved so that when somebody comes and they don't have a legitimate claim to be here, they're returned to their home country in an expeditious humanitarian fashion. And, we got to keep the fentanyl from coming across the border. I talked to one woman on the campaign trail who lost her daughter to a fentanyl overdose. And I don't have children. I've never been through that, but I can't even imagine the loss. And, you know, this is a matter of national security. So to fly down to the border or to stay in Washington and spin your chaos and make this some kind of political game, you know, he was against the bipartisan plan that would have helped secure the border that was scuttled a couple of months ago. And to play politics with some of our most important issues, that is not okay with me. And I don't think it's okay with the people here in the 10th.
Got it. Vinny, your hand's up. Go right ahead. Go right ahead, Vinny.
Janelle.
Hi.
So I lost a son to fentanyl overdose.
I'm sorry.
So,
How long ago?
oh, it's about 6 years. He
Oh,
was
for God's
21.
sakes. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And what I have learned is that I really hate to blame immigrants when many of the smugglers are Americans.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's the way they're
And,
doing
you
it
know,
now,
and
is making
yeah.
American mules. Yeah.
Right, because you know they need the money and this drug is so powerful. Yeah, so that would be another topic I'd be interested to hear you talk about, how to keep them out of the communities like Philadelphia,
Yeah.
you know, where the whole section is
Well,
created.
Vinny,
And then I have another question. Okay.
first again, I'm heartbroken for you. I can't even imagine what that's like. I don't want to imagine what it's like.
Mhm.
That kind of pain and loss. You know, we've seen far too much of it. I have a nephew who's really struggled. Thankfully, we haven't lost him, but he's 33 years old and at this point has the brain of a 16-year-old. So I know what drugs can do, whether they take a life or not. This is interesting to me. It's one of those things where I'm going to have to say that I don't know everything about how we keep fentanyl out. I know we have to secure the border, but I'd also like to go after fentanyl at the lab level. I don't know why there doesn't seem to be much of that going on, so that it never even reaches our borders, for heaven's sake. So I think we need to really study exactly where it starts, where it goes from there, how it tries to come into this country, and go after it hard, because it's killing and hurting far too many people. And I'm so sorry for you. And again, in terms of, I think this is part of what people mean when they say Washington is broken, why aren't we going after this in the ways I'm talking about? You know, why aren't we working together? It's an American problem. The people who die, you know, don't have D's or R's on their forehead. They're overdosing and they're struggling. And we must do better, whether it's mental health, drugs that lead to mental health issues, just drugs. You know, as I say, it's daunting to think about getting elected in this district. It is far more daunting to think about the work there is to be done after 12 years of inaction by Scott Perry. And these are serious issues that people want answers to. I think, you know, it upsets people that Washington is so broken we can't even do these things. Let's get term limits. I think 12 years is good. Scott Perry has served 12 years already. At one point, he said he was backing term limits. He promised that he'd do that. He said 6 years, but he's seeking his 13th year now. So there's that. Other reforms, you know, that people in Congress are using their jobs and insider information to get tips that you and I are not privy to, and becoming wealthy, you know, trading stocks, including their families. And I also think, you know, once you learn more about a lot of people who leave Congress and become lobbyists and the undue influence they have, that's pretty ugly too. So there's an awful lot that needs to be done. And again, Vinny, my heart goes out to you, and I know everybody here as well, because that is just, I'm just so sorry.
So
Vinny, Vinny, let me bring in Gloria, and then we'll come back to you. I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak, and I'll come back to you for your second question. Gloria, go right ahead. Gloria, you have to unmute. Unmute, Gloria.
Gloria Merrick from the Latino Center in Harrisburg, and I know you're recently at our festival. Thank you. But I think one of the
Oh no, thank you for all the good food, and it was wonderful. The dancing, the music, everybody was so happy. I loved it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But I think as a Latina looking at this election, I think one of the misconceptions is that when we talk about Latino issues, everybody talks about the border. What else do you have? What else can you like provide in terms of everybody's just talking about the border and Latinos, like that's the only issue that applies to them. What have you done, or what do you hope to do that would impact the Latino community, Latino businesses, breaking cycles of poverty, making homes more affordable in these barrios and in these communities that are in
Amen.
need? I mean, the border, and I totally get it. But that's not all there is to the Latino
No.
community, what its concerns are. So what is your take on that?
Let's talk about small business. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about the dignity of equality, and that you are not just accepted in our communities, society, but that you are celebrated for the richness you bring to it. You know, I wish the whole town would have turned out for the festival. And after I left you in Harrisburg, I went to York, and they had an amazing Hispanic Heritage Festival too. You know, this is a community that I really celebrate, and I wish that everybody could see that. And I wish that the rhetoric would be toned down about Black and brown people somehow, that you're less than, which couldn't be further from the truth. And, you know, let's appropriately fund education. How about that? Our public education, so that when everybody graduates high school, you have the exact same shot at success as your lighter skinned neighbors. Let's talk about small businesses, and let's get, let's get programs implemented so that you can not just barely survive, but so that you can thrive. I know I've been out at a lot of festivals and just in the community talking to everyone on the campaign trail, and they talk about a lot of different things that are specific to their business. For instance, some small businesses that operate now sort of in kiosks or tents at festivals would love to go bricks and mortar because they're having so much success and they have great products, but they can't afford the mortgages right now, or to have their own building, you know, or the rent. So that's a place to start. There are also folks who are doing really well, but they just need help figuring out the tax part of it. So I really look forward, if I'm lucky enough to get to Washington and get into Congress and have offices with constituent services, I'm looking forward to being one-stop shopping for folks to be able to come in and learn how to handle the taxes for their business at whatever stage they are. So there's an awful lot that can be done, and an awful lot that needs to be done, and an awful lot that has not been done in the past 12 years. So I hope you know I'm going to work my you-know-what off for your community, our community.
Thank you very much, Nell. I've been told that we have a limited amount of time left with Ms. Stelson, so I want to make sure that we get at least Charlie Thompson's questions in. So Charlie, do you want to give us some a question or two for Janelle? And maybe I'll take all the questions that are still out there and then let Janelle do a general discussion. I don't want to hold her up, but this is pretty important too, Janelle. But go ahead, Charlie.
Amen, Joyce. Amen. That's why we're all here.
Charlie, unmute. Make sure you unmute. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
There we go. Okay. Janelle, I wanted to ask you if you know, we've had a blizzard of television advertising from both sides and from a lot of outside groups. And I was just wondering if there is any particular ad that's being run by those who are opposing you that drives you most crazy, or if there are two or three that you'd like.
Well, the good news is, Charlie, I got my nose down. I'm grinding away, doing the work here in PA10 and don't have much time to watch TV, which is probably a bit of a blessing right about now. But I have heard that if you all have skills with a scalpel, maybe you want to go to the border with Nancy Pelosi and me and do transgender surgeries on what they call illegal aliens. I would never call a person an alien, but, just some of the more fantastical, I don't know these people. I've never been in politics before. I've been on the news doing my job, and it's kind of interesting. I remember the first time I saw one of these things that were a lie, I said to my team, oh my gosh, because as a journalist, as you know, Charlie, we deal in facts. And if you get your facts wrong, you probably aren't going to have a job. And it's always been the same for me. So the first time I saw some lies, I was like, oh, what do we do? Do we call them and get them to take it down? Or do we sue? Like, what do you do to keep this from happening? These things aren't true. And my team said, well, the news is different than politics. And there is actually not a lot of recourse. And I guess, you got to hope that people see through sort of the nonsense. That's why I've tried to keep my ads pretty plain and talk about, voting records and what I would like to do. I'm not interested in vilifying any party or any spectrum. I'm just interested in trying to take care of the wants and needs of the people here in the 10th district. And they vary greatly. The other day I was out knocking doors in York County, and a Republican woman driving a beautiful red SUV was backing into her driveway when I was knocking in her neighborhood. And I said, oh, hey, I'm Janelle. Shook her hand and she said, you can go to the next house. I'm voting for you. She said, I'm a Republican and I'm voting for you. And so's my husband. I think his name was Sam. I hope I'm not outing them here. But anyway, I said, well, is there anything you need to see, if I'm lucky enough to get to Washington from your next congresswoman, your first congresswoman? And she said, yeah, how do you feel about smoking in casinos? And I was kind of taken aback. That's not something I've heard anywhere else on the campaign trail yet. And I was honest. I said, well, to be clear, I haven't really been a lot of places where anybody's smoking inside these days. And I said, I didn't realize people were still smoking in casinos. And I said, what do you think about it? And then I came to learn that she works with the Lung Association. So it made sense. So it's just, I'm interested literally in what's going on here and what the Reverend wants, what Joyce Davis wants, what Dr. Joshi wants, these are all important things. And hearing Vinny's story about, losing your child to fentanyl, these are the things that I care about. I don't care about the nonsense. And it's, I've always been an independent thinker, partly being baked into me because I was a journalist, but that's who I still am. And I actually, instead of shining a bright light on our concerns and our problems and our issues and holding the powerful accountable, I guess I would still be doing that if I'm lucky enough to get to Congress. But, instead of shining a light, now I can carry their voices to the halls of Congress and make sure that what we need actually is tended to. And again, we've not had that for 12 years. We have a guy who voted against the infrastructure plan. Nonpartisan, I've done the story for the past several years. Trucker Magazine calls Pennsylvania's roads the worst in the entire country. We have a lot of pavement here, a lot of trucking, and our roads are really ripped up. We need that money. We need to fix the roads. Look at just from Harrisburg over to Cumberland County. Look how many bridges we have. 8 with the world's longest railroad bridge down by Fort Hunter. They're old, they're crumbling, they're deteriorating. They need to be tended to. These are good paying, in many cases, union jobs to implement the plan. Scott Perry voted against all of that. So again, here's somebody who keeps voting to hurt us, not help us. And I hope that's the opposite of what I'll be if I'm lucky enough to get down there.
Well, Janelle, your time is running out. Our time is running out, but I want to at least give the whatever final questions there and let you wrap it up. And my hope will be also that as a journalist, which you clearly were, that you will keep these lines of communication with our journalists open, transparency, speaking to us and speaking to the public. But you can talk about that. Let me do David Dix. David, what is your question for Janelle? And then I'll move on.
Joyce, I just wanted to let you know in the future before Mr. Dix speaks, who, by the way, has one of the most fabulous wives anywhere too. I just want to say, in terms of journalism, you'll get an awful lot of attention. I understand exactly what journalism is set up to do, which is the people's business, much like I'll be doing in a different place. Oh, well, I'm losing my set. There you go. Sorry.
You're working hard there.
Anyway, very fancy studio here. The tape must have given way. Sorry about that. Anyway, I just want you to know, I know how important what you do, what Charlie does every day when he's pounding the pavement to tell our stories and hold the powerful accountable. in my mind, there is, yes, there are a lot of things to be done, but that's extraordinarily important work. I will always be here for you.
Thank
I
you
honor
for
what
that.
you do. Yeah, sorry,
Appreciate
David,
it.
go ahead.
No, I'll try to be as concise as possible. Thank you for offering time this afternoon to discuss your platform. It seems over recent weeks that the key constituency group that's been advocated to, both at the national level in key states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and even in your diverse district of the 10th Congressional District, have been Black men. Vice President Harris recently put out a platform for Black men. I'd love to know whether or not you've analyzed that platform. What parts of those platforms do you plan to incorporate if elected to Congress? And do you have your own platform? I saw recently that leader Jeffries was in Harrisburg meeting with Black men. I'd love to hear about your engagement in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
this is a group that's very important to me. And oh, I'm sorry, Joyce, go ahead.
I'm just trying to be mindful of the time you have and not wanting to leave any pressing questions unanswered. So, Reverend Strauss, do you have one quickly?
Well, before we get to the Reverend, let me just finish with Mr. Dix, if I may. I just want to tell you, this is a constituency, if you will, that matters very much to me. It's certainly one at a couple events that I've been to with minority leaders. Sometimes I'll say, all right, who's seen Scott Perry recently? And I see no hands go up. And then I'll say, okay, who's seen him in the past year? Usually no hands go up. This is why he has an F rating from the NAACP. And I guarantee you, this is something that I'm going to work very hard on. I may not make it to A+, but I'm going to be working on small businesses, affordable housing.
Think of the Vice President's plan.
Pardon?
What was your analysis of the Vice President's plan for Black men?
Unfortunately, I've been grinding away doing my work. Again, I haven't seen a lot of TV, and the Vice President hasn't called me to ask my opinion on anything yet. Anyway, just saying, I don't exactly know what's in it. I cannot imagine. I just think that she's going to be doing the people's work.
Very good. Reverend Strauss and Charlie, I'll let you guys quickly get in your Reverend Strauss.
Well, yeah, and this is quick. Accessibility. One of the issues with Scott Perry, and you've kind of alluded to this a couple of times, is that he has been very difficult to reach, or at least people like myself who did advocacy for 19 years for the faith community, we were not very welcome. And the offices have been made harder to find in a lot of cases, or there's no one staffing them. And I'm hoping that you will be more accessible than that, and also I'm assuming this will be the case, but have staffers who are really much more willing to serve everybody and not just the folks who kind of support your position.
Absolutely.
Very good. Let's get Charlie's question in quickly and then let Janelle wrap up. Charlie, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just have one that is has lingered with me since the debate on August 8th. You said something in that debate when people were talking about the issue of illegal immigration. You said that at one point in that debate, you said we need to find out where they are and they need to be sent home. And that it sounded like you were throwing in with those that would support some level of deportation. And I just wanted to ask you if I'm interpreting that right, and if I am, how would you step ladder it? I mean, and would there be any kind of
Sure.
pathway to citizenship for some portion of the undocumented folks that are in America?
Sure. And very quickly, I just wanted to say, Reverend Strauss, I plan to have very strong constituent services. I plan to be available for whatever you need. The job title is representative. I will be literally carrying your voices to the halls of Congress. If we can't get something accomplished, I'm going to come back. If it's a small thing that's a personal matter, I'm going to talk to you one-on-one over coffee. I don't drink coffee, tea, or a slice of pizza or something like that. If it's a larger issue, we'll have town halls. Of course, the media will always be invited and always have a direct line. And my constituent offices are going to look like the community, and hopefully be on public transportation lines, so it's easy for people to get there too. So that's you. Charlie, in terms of immigration, I have been really clear. We got to secure our border. And if there's somebody who is here illegally, and we're not talking about dreamers, here. I want a path to citizenship for them. They've been working alongside us and paying taxes alongside of us for years. There must be, we got to get them established permanently. So I just mean, if somebody got over and is pushing fentanyl, brought it in, doing some of those things, we need to find those people and they need to be removed and sent back to their home countries.
Well, very good. I think you had a follow-up, Charlie. I don't know. I saw you, but you got to unmute to quickly do it. We got to.
Yeah, just do you have any sort of time length where you would say, well, this person is here long enough and his record shows that he should be allowed to stay versus this person needs to go? Or are you literally talking about people that are caught in the act of committing crimes?
Well, certainly if you're illegal and you're committing a crime, okay, that's a whole different tier. But and I look forward, honestly, Charlie, to learning more about this, learning what can be done. When you have a presidential candidate talking about, basically being a Gestapo and mass deportations, and that's not the way to handle anything in this country. That's not what people are looking for.
Well, I think that's it. I know you have a busy schedule. I thank you for taking so much time, and good luck in your campaign. I know we'll be seeing a whole lot more of you. Thanks to everyone for joining in and listening. And thank you. See you next time. We hope some of our other candidates who haven't responded yet will do so and join us to at least speak to our viewers and our listeners.
You'll get them all, Joyce. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.